Hello? Yeah. So I was saying salam. What a pleasure to be here. Such a panel. I mean, I've been to MENOG meeting. I've never seen so many people, especially at this time. But I think the coffee is keeping you up. This is really good. So this presentation, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Xavier Lebris. I work for the RIPENCC registration services. And this presentation is going to be about how to obtain IPv4 and IPv6 address, but also how to protect them, and most how we can help you with protecting them. So if we look about the over time, the IPv4 became like a scarce resource, and basically we needed to think about way to adapt this. So the policy have been developed by the community to basically make that this scarcity become fair to everybody. So in terms of distribution. So in the meantime, IPv6 have been slowly picking up. So if you look at the goal or the aim of this presentation is to show that also over time transfer IPv4 distribution happen in this region, but also we've seen an increase because of the scarcity of dispute or potential hijack because of outdated data or inaccurate data. And this is really important for you to realize that these can be also a threat for your organization. So this is also an aim of this presentation, is to also tell you how we can help you to make those data more safe. So if we look a bit into the distribution of resources, we're going to start with getting, for example, IPv4 allocation. You're gonna see that as an LAR, you're allowed to get an IPv4. As a new LAR, you get a /22, so 1024 IP address. As an existing LAR, you can get also this additional allocation. This is a one time you can get it. So this is what you are in a situation at the moment. So this is the policies that have been defined like this. This is also from the remaining pool. So this will have, for example, an existence that could be for maybe 2.5 years, maybe more. For the moment, with the rate of the current consumption of supply, you can see that the last 185/8 was distributed in 5.5 years, which give a kind of idea of which speed we go. If you look at this graph, for example, that shows the distribution of IPv4, you can see that we just in the dark green, you see the not so long ago, so 2 weeks ago, what is called the last /8, the 185/8, was depleted. So now we are starting to distribute from other type of resources that came back to the RIPENCC, from IANA, from different LAR that went bankrupt, for example, and just returned their resources to the RIPENCC. So this is the way you can see how it goes. So the trend is into a really smooth way for the last 5.5 years. Now, if you look in the tiny light blue part, it shows you the IPv4 that were reserved for temporary assignment or allocation also, but also for what is called Internet Exchange Point assignment. So these have been set aside by policy to be able to distribute them. So it gives an idea of what we have for the future. Now, if we look the distribution of resources and the amount of members, so you have in blue the number of LAR. So if we look for Iran is above 400, around 430, you can see that the amount of allocation that were distributed over time are above 700 allocation. This means that members, for example, can have several allocation. If you compare with the country in the region, you see that you're in the lead. This is an idea of the IPv4 final /22 distribution. Now, if we look at getting IPv6 addresses, what you need to be is to be an LAR, and have a plan, basically, to make assignment in the future. What means to make assignment in the future is just to have, for example, a plan to distribute address space inside your network. So that could be, for example, a test lab. At the end of the day, what is really important is that you get this allocation to be able to start to practice. Because don't forget one thing, is that with the deployment of IPv6, you're going to need to start, for example, now, and it's going to need an average of 2 years to be deployed. So it gives you an idea also how much supply you have in IPv4 and how much supply, well, how much time you might need depending on your network as an average to deploy v6. So if we go back to the getting IPv6 address, you can see that the minimum allocation that you get is a /32, which is quite a huge number of IPv6. You can extend it to a /29 if you want. There's no extra question, extra fee that are required for it. It's just waiting for you to be distributed. You can get also larger allocation, but this is based on demonstrated information or justification. For example, the amount of customers, things like that. So let's imagine you have 2 million customers with a specific assignment. Those guys, they can get like a larger allocation than the /29, but it needs to be really demonstrated. But that's possible. Also, you can get some what is called provider independence. So this is kind of portable IPv6 address that you can basically request on behalf of an end user, and this guy is going to bring it to a different upstream if they wish. So it's a bit like a portable address space. So this said, if you look a bit more into the IPv6 distribution in the region, again, Iran is in the lead. If you see the amount of LAR and allocation itself, which is quite a good amount. Now, if we look really the total amount of members and the total amount of allocation, I assume that the people that are in this room will be going back to the office and saying, okay, do you know what? We're going to request our first IPv6 allocation. It's really easy to get. You don't need to pay extra fee or whatever. You just can start to test it, start to do things with it. So if we look now into the Ipv6 ripeness, which is a way to basically see if you are using IPv6. So let's say you have like an IPv6 allocation. If you start to announce it, after that, if you have your reverse DNS that is set up, so the reverse DNS, it's like a mapping of your IPv6 address into DNS. So you have like different information there that can be showing a form of pickup of IPv6. So you have also a way to measure basically the usage of the v6. So if you look at the ripeness for Iran, you can see that 44% of the LAR in the LAR, sorry, the local internet registry in Iran are having an allocation, which is quite great. 11%, sorry, are having an allocation and a route object, and 5% are having an allocation and a route object and announce it. And the next star is about having also reverse DNS set up. And you can see that altogether it gives like around 65% of the entire LAR in this country that are having an IPv6 allocation. It means that there's still 35% that don't have one, which is, I think, this could increase. If you compare with other countries, and I would say kind of average, you would see that this is a bit under the average, but it's still not bad. And this is something that can be really easily changed. So now, if we look at this graph, which shows also the announcements of v6, so what you can see is that in red, you have the information that are from the RIPE region. So let's say all the countries, how they announce their IPv6 address. If you look at the yellow line, you see that there's a form of parallel between the two lines, and the yellow line is for all the countries worldwide. You can see that in Iran, it was an uptake until 2011, and after that, I think people were really keen on trying also V6, and for different reasons might have stopped to announce it. At the end of the day, you can see that there's an uptake now that is coming back. At the end, it shows also that there's things already in place that are already been configured in the past. So it's just a matter to have a common or global IPv6 announcement in this country. But it shows quite some important info here. Now, if you look at the end user in IPv6, this is taken from APNIC data. This is showing that around 3% of the end user are over V6. You would think, wow, that's small, but sometimes you would think what it is in the region. You're much higher than the other country around, except maybe India, but that's a different story because APNIC ran out of V4 earlier than our region. Now, if we go a bit further, if I can, so you get the resource transfer. So now we are talking about Ipv4 transfer. This is something that is quite happening a lot in this region because of the amount of supply available. So let's say that you can get a /22, so other people might have some supply to offer to you. So this is the way the transfer is operated. So IPv4 can be transferred. This is a policy that have been developed by the RIPE community, and this is done between LARs. So when you transfer an allocation to your LAR, so let's say /22, you can't retransfer it for 24 months. So you can only do it after 24 months. This is something that is really checked. We do thorough checks for all the paperwork, and sometimes we look at some information like routing, DNS, to see that nothing is left behind to avoid any bad surprise. You can do also transfer of PI or provider independent between LAR and end user. And it's based all that on the RIPE policy that were developed a while back. There's some specific document that you need to sign. Anyway, we don't get involved into the financial aspect. This is between the offering and the receiving part. You can find all this data, by the way, into the transfer statistic that I'm going to show you now. So you can have by policy, you need to have the transparency of what we do. We distributed allocation over time to entities. By policy, we should show from the transfer from whom to whom is going. You have it also for the PI transfer. So you can, it's transparently available to everybody, and this is done by the community who wanted to have that inside the policy. So this is only for IPv4 that are distributed who was distributed by RIPE and CC. For example, the address space that was distributed before RIPE and CC in existence, the legacy, are not part of those transfer documentation. So now, where to look to get a transfer? RIPE and CC has a transfer listing service that you can access via your LAR portal. So if you're an LAR, you can get into your LAR portal, and there you have what is called the IPv4 transfer listing. You have people offering and people requesting to get a transfer. This is something that you would access via the portal, so it means you need to have what is called a RIPE and CC access account. If you don't have any, I would suggest that you go back to, when you're back in the office, that you go to your colleagues to ask around about it. If you have any question about it, by the way, I'm here tomorrow and today, so just come to me, ask me a question, I'm here to help you if you need. So now, there's another way to get a transfer is via a broker. So the brokers itself, what they do is that they put in relation offering and receiving parties, and basically take an extra fee for the work. Ripeness has a specific agreement with those brokers to say you're going to respect the right policy and procedure to be able to do the transfer. So they a bit or agree to something. So there's a list on our website. Please have a look at this, because if you want to have a transfer with people that are trustable, it's better to do it into a certain way. Now, we are not endorsing them, we are just telling that they agree to apply the policies. The correct registry information is the key for ensuring the quality of the transfer, because you have to make sure at all times that you're talking with the right holder, because this is often the problem in dispute or hijacks. So now, if we look at the completed Ipv4 transfer in the past, you can see that a lot happened during the last years in terms of transfer. So it became really quite a market. So what is quite interesting here is also to see that it's often into the end of the year that happen massive amount of transfers. So it might be related to budget or things like that. So here the total amount, if you look in number of transfer, it can range jusqu'à 300 transfers per month. The size of them can be relatively small in terms of the allocation that is transferred. Generally, it's more like /22s. But there's also larger allocation that you can see. For example, in 2016, in August, there was a large Ipv4 transfer. So now, if we look another way also of consolidate, or basically it's done from mergers, or acquisition itself is something else. You need to pass via the transfer policy. Merger is much more based on a legal entity that takes another legal entity, and it's defined by the Chamber of Commerce or the company house. If you look at the amount of those consolidation or merger, there happened a lot more around 2015. So people wanted to make really the allocation list or data more accurate. So this is one of the reasons why this graph is showing a peak in 2015. If you look now about the Ipv4 transfer in the region, you can see that you are in the lead big time. If you compare with other countries around, Iran is really the leader in transfers, but they're all coming from other countries. Not all of them, because you can see the green part in this graph, which is within the country. So it's most likely an LAR here that transferred to another LAR that is within Iran. If you compare with other countries around, you can see that, for example, in Turkey it's a bit different, or in Saudi, it's more like they transfer everything from outside. So it gives also an idea about the trend, or the way the Ipv4 is transferred. Now, if you look a bit more into the numbers of transfer in the region, again, it's done into the lead is again Iran, and it's really important to look at this data as comparing with the other countries. So you really need of these resources, and that might be a way to change also in the future with the deployment of V6, because you can see that you have now the supply, and it might be for a mid-term option, but you have to think in terms of, okay, if I start to think about Ipv6 now, deploying Ipv6, the return on investment will be in the coming time. And it means that you don't need also to invest all this money into V4. So now, Ipv4 transferred in the region, we just seen it. So you have another way to transfer resources, which is inter-area transfer. Inter-area means from ARIN or from IPNIC or from our IPNCC who have compatible policies to be able to make transfers. You can also transfer resources from a company in the US or in Australia. At the end of the day, it's really something that is possible, but you have to apply the policy that are locally there. So now if we look more into the trend of which way or which is the path of the current the way of the transfer, you can see that it's mostly arraying to RIPE and CC. So that's something that you can control in a better way. It means that American company that have organization in Europe decided to transfer their address space there. Here you can see also that arraying to APNIC was also a huge number of transfer. But this is giving you an idea of the flow of the resources at the moment, and it's really quite significant. So it's another option in terms of transfer. Again, it's all detail on in the policy that have been reaching consensus and were decided by the community. So now, the RIPE and CC role in terms of transfer. What do we do? What we want, the first goal, is to make the registry, the RIPE registry, up to date. I mean, everybody as network operators need those information to be accurate. So at all time, we try to make it really the most accurate as possible. So we are not the only one on network operator to need to have this accurate data. You have also law enforcement agency or other regulator. This is also important to remember that. We support our members with the transfers process, and we do a thorough due diligence to check that the legal organization is really the holder of the resources. And at the same time, we try to protect the resource and the database, because we try to also have all the objects that were before the transfer to be also updated by the holder of it. Now if we look at the increase of dispute, what are they based on? Often the dispute of transfers are related to outdated contact information. This is often the way to target a range to be hijacked or transferred. So generally it's like contact that remove the other contact and basically of the LAR and basically transfer the allocation or other resources. The hijack is a bit different. People tend to look at outdated contact that they are in the LAR but also in the database and provide, for example, fake document, fraudulent information, or modified database object with acquired maintainer, for example, password. The maintainer is a bit like a lock in the database. So keeping your data up to date is very important. How you can do that? You can protect your resource to ensure that the data is correct. How do you do that? You come to us, you can request, hey, I would like to know if everything is according to the best practice. And what we can also do is like what is called an assisted registry check, which is like a mini audit. We tend to do quite a lot of them every year. I'm going to show you some stats about it. So we try to help the maximum our members to make this data accurate and protecting this resource. So we will always try to help you to find a way to clean those data. With the assisted registry check, if we look at the outcome of we did 6,700 ARC, so this assisted registry check, we contact by telephone the admin of the LAR account and we ask them different parts of the public information in the database, but also the confidential information if they're still accurate. If we look at the 93% of those assisted registry checks, they ended up in data to be updated, meaning they were not accurate. Now in the current region, we did 835 assisted registry checks. If you would like this to happen to get an idea, you can just ask me and I can organize one when I'm back in the office and I can show you how it works. So if we look at the different type of results, you can see that a lot of the time it's admin privilege, so the account of the portal that is not accurate. The LAR contact in the database that have been there for some time that are no more updated. And this is the end of my current presentation. So if you have questions, I'm available.
Yes, so we have about 5 minutes and 4 seconds for questions. If you have questions, please line up at the microphone and remember to say who you are and who you work for the benefit of the live stream. Thank you, Xavier. So many questions. Wow. All right.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. No transfers. Everyone has all the address space you need. All right. In that case, yeah, thank you, Xavier. He is around, sitting over there, if you have any questions. So before I introduce the next speaker, Shaheen has asked me to say a few words about the social events this evening before you all run away. Shaheen?
Yeah, امروز امشب یه سوشال ایونت داره آسیاتک توی باغ نیاوران هست. ساعت 7:15 اتوبوس دم در هتل هست که میبره اونجا تا حالا مثلا 10 و این شب هم احتمالاً طول بکشه. در خدمتتون هستیم، تشریف بیارید.
All right, we understood all of that. I suppose I just follow. So our next speaker is Samane from TU Delft, whose last name, unfortunately, I have no hope of pronouncing, but she can probably help with that. She is going to talk to us about the joint responsibility for security on shared web hosting for the next half hour. So, warm welcome.
Thanks, Philip. Hi, everybody. I'm Samane, and I'm a postdoctoral. Is that good now? Yeah. So I'm Samane. I am a postdoctoral researcher from Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. The topic of my presentation is a bit different from other presentations since it's about security in shared websites hosted on shared servers within shared hosting providers. So what is the motivation behind this presentation is that hosting providers are often faulted for not doing enough in terms of security. How this is happening is because a number of abuse incidents that are hosted within these networks. Websites used for phishing, for DDoS attacks, for all kinds of internet abuse that you know better than me. And they are always blamed at why they are not doing enough to protect these websites or their servers. The question we are researching in this presentation is whether it's true and to what extent they can realistically prevent their network from being abused. I forgot to mention this is a joint work with other universities and research institutes from all over the world. I am the lead author of this work. So this is what we did in a nutshell. We know that in order to have security in place or to reduce vulnerability, you have to have certain controls in place. If you don't have these controls in place, a potential attack can become an incident. In the rest of this presentation, I call them abuse observations. How an attack can become incident can be derived by your controls, or can just be the artifact of your network. If you are a big hosting provider, you can attract more attacks just because you have more websites or you have more servers. I mentioned earlier that the focus of this research is on shared hosting providers. The reason behind that is that we think for dedicated servers, the webmasters or people who use these servers have full control over the security. So they have admin rights. Often they also do it themselves or to their organization. Whereas for shared hosting, it's mostly used by newbies or small companies. where there is limited administrative rights to the user, to the website owner, and most of the security is managed by the provider. So this is a good niche to estimate whether the provider is doing good in terms of security or not. For those who might not know what is a shared hosting, it's a server that its resources is used by several websites. We've seen more than 100 websites on one shared server. So in order to measure security, we had to estimate security. We had to measure a series of features. We did it through a passive measurement for this, to collect these features. We did the measurements through the custom written tools that we had. We also used some off-the-shelf tools from the market, depending on the feature we collected, such as Zone Master, SSLIs, and others. So we started from an initial set of 450,000 domains, and we crawled these domains up to 20 web page each. So we continued from the link web pages starting from the initial page. This is so far a snapshot measurement from 2016, and the measurement lasted a week. What we collected was a series of security indicators as well as software features. The security features that we opted to collect are designed to protect against certain vulnerabilities or attacks. For instance, CSP or big browsers XSS protection is to protect against XSS attacks. Or some of the others, such as HSTS, is designed to protect against transport layer vulnerabilities or attacks, etc. I'm not going to go through the details of every feature, but if you have questions, I can get back to you at the end of the presentation. Regarding the software features, we checked if the software used by the website is up to date, or as we call it, patched. How we define the patch software? Patch software is a software, the latest version of the software that is packaged within the well-known Linux operating systems. We chose, I think, Ubuntu and two others that I don't have them on the back of my mind, but the most popular operating systems. So we used that HTTP server. We checked correct implementation of SSL. The admin panels used for shared hosting, patchness of PHP, Open SSH, and content management systems. This is one series of data we collected. These we later use as an indicator for security. On the other hand, we have another sets of data set that we use as an indicator of attack on internet or abuse observation. These we got from third-party firms. We have phishing data from Anti-Phishing Working Group and malware data from Google Safe Browsing data that is provided by us by third-party companies. So what did we find? These are the descriptive findings, meaning just the explanation of our measurements. The most surprising things we found was that for all of these security features that we collected, the use of such features are really limited. As you can see, in the second column of this table, there is only 13% of the domains that we had out of 450,000 domains, only 13% adopt HTTP-only cookie. And it goes down to 0.8% for configuration against XSS protection in the browser, which is very low adoption. Now, we know that for some of these features, not all the websites may need them, depending on the type of content they use. If they are not serving JavaScript, you might not need some of these, etc. But for most, it can be used in different kinds of websites and servers. In the plot, down to the in the bottom of the table, you can see how it's distributed across the providers. So on the x-axis, you see the percentage of the domains that are adapting these features, and on the y-axis, you have the total number of providers. So what you see is that for CSP, the Content Security Policy, only 20% from all providers, only 20% of their domains have this configuration. And similar is for X-frame options and HTTP-only cookie. This number is very low, given that all these configurations are advertised over and over that should be adapted for security. Now, this morning, upon a friend's suggestion, I also looked at Iran, how Iran is doing, or Iranian providers is doing in this sense, and this is the distribution you see. So in our data, we had 10 hosting providers from Iran. Again, we see that for some providers, for instance, for HTTP-only cookie, there are maybe one provider that all of their domains, so the bar on 100% in the middle plot is full, so they are pushing for this, or we suspect that this is a default setting that they have. So actually, I could say that the landscape is better in comparison to the international landscape, but still there is a lot of space to move towards more secure configurations. If we look at the patching practices, so how are software updated across across the landscape we measured, we see it's very different for different software. We would expect this because some software need less frequent patches, although there are vulnerabilities on the unpatched part of this ecosystem, but still it's hard to patch certain server-side software because of compatibility issues, etc. So surprisingly, what we see is that for CMSs, which are sort of commonly known vulnerable software, there is a lot more patched than being unpatched. What you see as a gray area in this plot is the part of the ecosystem that we could not detect the version of the software. We suspected that some companies or hosting providers or webmasters are putting some effort in place to harden detection of the version, which is by itself a kind of an effort to hide all of your landscape from criminals, potential attackers. When we move to the more server-side stuff, such as SSL, you see that, well, there are more patched versions than unpatched, but still there is around 40% of the ecosystem that we could not discover. And this is again the example of Iran in terms of software patching. We see that for server-side software, such as HTTP server and admin panel, there are two providers that are 100% patched. So this is really impressive. And in terms of CMS, and I looked at the details of the version information, there is some lacking behind. This could be because there are automatic updates set by the provider that are not regularly done, or that the shared hosting providers left this part for the customers to do themselves, and they are not doing much in this sense. Moving forward, in order to make sense of these features we collected and check their relations with actual abuse on internet, we also need to take into account that other factors also play a role in terms of what providers do and do not do. For instance, we measured a bunch of factors here, but we didn't measure the amount of cost that providers put in place in terms of this security. We could not measure the amount of staff they have, and all other factors, technical factors that contribute to security. For that reason, we decided to approximate security effort as a latent variable, which means a variable that that has these features that we collected, but also some others that we don't know about. How we did that? Well, we used a statistical analysis called factor analysis. This method takes into account all the unknown factors or unobserved factors. And it gave us four different factors that we named them: content security practices, the practices done by webmasters, the infrastructure security practices, and the web application security practices. If you look at the factors 1 to 4, you see also that the features with the highest correlation are in line with the name of the variable. So the data actually shows us that they are factors on the side of the customer, very clear cut separated from the factors on the side of the provider. Now, in order to know to what extent the provider influences this, we had to run a fixed effect regression. Well, leave apart the mathematical part. What you see in the bottom row, as in R square, the difference between MR3 and MR4, which we suspect would be the provider level factors, the web application security and the web infrastructure security, is very different from MR1 and MR2 in relation. And that really shows that the providers have a good influence or big influence on the server part, which is separated from the customer part. How is this related to abuse? So how is this effort that they are putting in place to secure their website is reducing abuse? Phishing and malware is the next thing we measured. So I'm not showing the statistical model here because it was too big and confusing. But here are all the conclusions. So what we saw was that the factor that explains the amount of abuse in a provider's network is size. So if you are a bigger provider, you attract more abuse, regardless of your security. Now, the second factor that contributes the most is the type of service you run. If you are running shared hosting, by nature, shared hosting is more insecure. And if you put more effort into securing it, you are a step ahead into reducing the amount of abuse that you see in your network. We saw that abuse correlates strongly with infrastructure security and web application security, that the Iranian hosting providers were doing relatively well in that sense. Yeah, well, the rest. And we also saw that the features that are related to webmaster security, the things like CSP, HSTS, HTTP-only cookie, these kind of configurations also have a statistically significant effect on reducing abuse. Well, what are the implications for providers? I know this part would be what the providers, if there are any in this crowd, would be interested in. Is that when you are building your business model, if you are a big network operator, if you are a big provider, there should be measures in place that take into account that the fact that you have thousands of domains will bring more security incidents, and there should be measures in place to secure that. Some measures are explained in these presentations, the configurations that we measured. Some others are not, but if they are in place, they play a significant role in reducing this abuse. Now, for the providers that are smaller providers, such as shared hosting is so far the most affordable hosting plan. One can understand that it's harder to put more cost to secure the servers and the websites. What we recommended out of the result of this research was that they could use more indirect measures. For instance, they could put automatic notifications to the customers to outsource the effort from the provider to the customer to put the configurations in place, or put these configurations as a default configuration, so the customer does not even need to change and it goes securely from the provider to the customer. There are other things such as regularly nudging the customers to update, but those need more cost and more staff in place. Something that has been always said, patching outdated software also plays a really significant role in terms of security, and that is also, as other research showed, is very much recommended by this research as well. That's it. I'm more happy to receive questions if there are any.
All right, thank you very much, Samane. Any questions? Yes. Please form an orderly line. Remember to tell the camera who you are, who you work for.
I've been here for quite time. My name is Payam from Chatel. I used to work in TU Delft as a PhD student in the same team which Samane was, and I left the program. So one of the things which I would like to share with the audience, please take the security very serious. Still in Iran, the doors are closed. No money goes out easily. But the day money can move out easily, that's the day you guys would realize how security is important. And please take necessary actions. Abuse reports, which comes, botnets, the shadow servers reports it freely. There are several tools, so please take action for those reports at least. And the other thing which I would like to say about the slides you added for the Iran, with 1 million landscape, I think it's not good to say we are at good position. We should not be proud of that few domains. I'm not sure if Adirza is still in room, Adirza Saleh. No. So if it's possible someone from IPM can hand over the list of domains, 1 million domains, maybe this study can extend to that level. Is it possible to do that?
Sure.
Can you promise the audience if you receive that, you would do that?
Yeah. Well, we are continuing this study at the moment. We are doing a longitudinal study, and I mean, I am more than happy to also do a case study on Iran, and that would benefit both sides.
And the question which I have, and we used to have this question for several months, what to do, how to make providers aware of this?
Yeah, thanks, Payam. That's a really good question. I think this question goes into several levels. I am not very experienced in industry, but I see very different levels also from country to country. In the Netherlands, for instance, providers are more proactive. They are looking for ways to improve, and they are aware of abuse incidents. They are providers that have automatic feeds of abuse themselves, but we also see, also in the Netherlands, but also in other countries, that providers do not even know what is happening in their own networks, let alone in the other part of the world. So I think we thought of different methods, such as publishing names or naming and shaming. Yeah. Online, but I doubt if that, for instance, would work for non-international providers, such as Iranian providers. From academia to the rest of the world, we could use open data, open research results to just spread the word that security is important, and this is the result if you don't make your network secure. There are methods to get from the provider to the customer, so how to improve from that way. It could be forced by the government, but again, I don't know if any of these methods would work in Iran. It should be from really low level to high level, from the providers themselves, but also to the government, which requires some effort.
Yeah, maybe we can ask the audience. Guys, if someone write to your personal email that somewhere is insecure, how fast you would react in 1 day? Who would react in 1 day? And if someone publish your name on one Telegram channel, which is quite common, how fast you receive a call from the CEO? As soon as possible. So naming and shaming seems to be work. I'm not sure if it's ethical or not, if it is a real way to tackle this issue, but it seems it works. And yes, government can do, and also creating an indices shows which providers stand at what level. Anyway, thank you for your effort. It was great. I'll see you again here, and I hope the team can bring much more to the landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Baya.
Thank you for that lightning talk disguised as a question.
Babak Farokhi from Iran Paris Technologies. First of all, I would like to thank you for the insightful presentation. And I have actually 2 points to make. The first is about the CMS observation you had. You said they are more likely to be patched. And yes, this is true these days because most of the modern CMS softwares are equipped with this auto-update mechanism, but it is not happening for, the package managers. So you will most likely see the updated version or patched version of a CMS version and not an SSH server because that requires some manual work to do. The second thing, the actual question is that, have you had a chance to look into the operating system versions, whether or not they are being patched? Because we know some of the software, like the web servers, SSH servers, they tend to leak the version information about the underlying operating system. So have you had the chance to do a case study?
Thank you for your question. So we started, our goal was also to get information from operating systems, and indeed there are some SSH and other software that leak information about the OS, but the amount of versions that we could collect from non-intrusive measurement methods was very limited. So we left that out in the middle of the measurement, and we did not continue it. In the follow-up of the work, because when we do intrusive measurements, which means we put load on the server of the provider, we need certain kind of ethical considerations, ethical committees. So in the continuation of the work, we will do that, but for now, we couldn't. But if your question was more about the concern that some software leaked this is truly the case, and we observed that also in the data.
Just to add some minor thing, the operating system is less likely to be updated because it is more complex to update an operating system, requires reboot and so on. And maybe a method can be scanning a whole IP range of a provider and see if they are running the same version of an operating system. So that says they are actually running the out-of-the-box version and never updated or patched the OS. So that was just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. But when we thought about this, there are also providers that patch internally the operating system. So we always see the outdated version, but they are doing internal patches that we don't see. But indeed, it's a good suggestion. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? No? If not, thank you, Samane. So, our next speaker, if he can be found, is Ahmad Reza Mollapur from Arvan Clouds. There he is. Good. And we are almost running on time again.
Hello, everyone. Hope you all are having a great day. First of all, I would like to thank all for coming, and I'm so happy that MENOG 18 is taking place here in Iran. Hope that will continue. In this section, I'm going to talk about Anycast CDN, and first, we're going to take a look at what does a CDN do, and what do you expect from it. And after that, we're going to see the differences between the traditional CDNs and modern CDNs. And after that, we're going to look what, I forgot. We're going to talk about the Anycast itself and everything that has anything to do with it, such as IXPs, peering, and etc. And at last, we're going to see some stats and measurements in the region, Middle East. So let's start. As you all know, CDNs are made to distribute the content and provide a high available and high efficient network for the users. A goal of a CDN is to make everything faster by utilizing all methods from the network level to the application level. For approaching this, CDNs handle the application level by doing some caching, compressing data, and minifying data from the origin server and serving it to the users. For the network level, they try to get as close as much to their users and make their routing in the way that the user will be routed to the closest pop site.
If I can interrupt you for 1 minute, your slides are slightly broken. You'll get bonus minutes, don't worry. So networking is easy, but computers are really, really difficult. All right.
Still it's not working, I guess.
Now we have black screens. They used to be blue when we were younger, but now they're black. Black is the new blue. All right. Have we tried turning it off and on again? Okay. So at least both the screens are black. There's consensus. All right, let's do some collaborative debugging. Alternatively, we can all go out and buy new glasses.
Since my slides are animated, it might be okay.
This, well, or you could just improvise, you know, interpretive
Try
dance.
to imagine some parts.
Just imagine the animations,
Yep.
okay?
And
Let's go with this.
what I was talking about was CDNs are trying to make everything faster. For the network layer, they try to get as close as much to the users by setting up different pub sites close to their users and make their routing in the way that the content will be loaded as the closest point. In the basis of determining the user location, there are some different behaviors with different CDN providers. And in this case, there are two different types. We can divide this with two different types called traditional CDNs and modern CDNs. Traditional CDNs are those which use DNS to identify the user's geographical location, and moderns are those which use some advanced more methods like IP Anycast for this determination. I'm gonna, in this next slides, I'm gonna show you some of these methods, and starting with one of the traditional methods. The first one is the simple Geo Dns, and this is also known as the first generation. And as you can see here, we have a client that wants to request for a website called test.com, and obviously the first step that he has to do is to send the DNS request to a public DNS server. And what a public DNS server does is to queries from the authoritative name server, which is now a CDN's, one of the CDN server. And the authoritative name server looks up at the IP address that it receives and sends the response based on this IP address to the public DNS, and the public DNS sends the response to the client. So client will be connected to the proper pub site. But as you may already notice, this has a big problem, and that's the authoritative name server isn't aware of the real client IP address. So imagine the client is sitting in Iran and puts its DNS on 4224, level 3, for example, and the authoritative name server receives the level 3 address instead of understanding the real client address. So the client will be connected to a wrong pub site. The next method is the Geo Dns with eDNS client subnet, or ECS. eDNS Client Subnet is a DNS extension developed by Google and OpenDNS, and it allows the recursive name servers like Google and Level 3 and others to specify the network subnet of the origin client that makes the DNS query. So now, public DNS and authoritative name server are now aware of the real client IP address. In this scenario, everything is just as the same, and except the public DNS, when it wants to query from the authoritative name server, it sends a new header called client subnet, which includes the subnet of the client that made the query. This may cover the issue that the previous method had, but in some cases, we might have the same issue. The first and big reason is that lots of DNS, public DNS, DNS services, like Level 3 and lots of others, don't support this extension, which means still clients will be connected to the wrong pub site. And that may cause increasing the latency instead of decreasing. So the problem still exists. And besides that, DNS, since it's working on base of the DNS service, TTLs and DNS caches might cause connectivity issues when CDN's health checks want to take put a server from out of the tier. So the client may be still connected to that wrong pub site. The next and the best method is the IP Anycast. And one thing, most of the CDN providers in the world are still using the second method, which was the Geo Dns with the eDNS client subnet. This method is based on the IP Anycast, and this is the modern way. And in this method, user will be connected to the closest pub site via BGP protocol. This method makes sure that the best path with the lowest network cost are always selected. Another benefit that this method has is that it helps us to mitigate DDoS attacks. For example, a portion of the DDoS attacks that's attacking our network will be absorbed by each of the pub site, and it will be distributed into the whole network, so it's not going to be overwhelmed by like the typical unicast networks, and they're going to be mitigated. There are only few CDN providers that are in the world that are using a fully infrastructure Anycast network, which I'm going to mention. But now a question that you may be asking is that why don't all CDN providers don't use this method for their geolocation determination or anything on their network? Well, the answer is it's all about the complexity that this method has. When you're dealing with the Anycast, you might get worried about the network loops, routing issues, efficient peering, that you need to get worried about all these factors that you don't need to deal with when you're using a DNS. So DNS is all simple, and you just need a Geo IP database that it's updated, so it's going to work. But when you figure about all these questions with the DNS, with the IP Anycast, it's going to work just perfect. Here, I'm going to jump to show you some stats from our CDN. For the past 24 hours, 2.5 billion requests has been collected from over 5,000 Iranian websites. I'm going to show you the web request share, foreign web request share of this Iranian website in the world. As you can see, Europe with 64% is at top, and after that, America and Asia are below Europe, and we're going to go deep and take a look at the Asia share exactly in details. And if you look deeper, we see the 74% of the Middle East visits comes from Asia visits comes from the Middle East. And the rest of 24% comes from the Asia Pacific or other Asian countries. It shows that the Middle East is more interested in the Iranian website contents. In the next slide, I want to show you the top country request divided into a service provider from each country and the country themselves. The first one is the United Arab Emirates with more than 50%, and then Turkey and Iraq. And from the service providers, you see Turk Telecom, Emirates Telecom, and Earthlink in the lead. Peering plays a great role for a CDN that is working on an Anycast network. The network team should figure out and look for what IXPs are main and important to peer with the other service provider. So you may be asking, among around 900 IXPs worldwide, which ones do CDN provider may have, which use Anycast network may have chosen? According to Peering DB, this is the table that contains 25 IXPs that are common between the CDNs that are using global Anycast infrastructure: Cachefly, Cloudflare, Arvon Cloud, Encapsula, Edgecast, and Fastly. As you can see in the Europe, DECIX and AMZIX, and in the South America, IXBR, and in the North America, Equinix, with the different cities in the US, and in Oceanic, IX Australia and Mega IX, and in the Asia Pacific, JPICs are more common and important between these providers. But there is one problem, and you don't see any IXPs in the Middle East that are common between these providers. According to PCH.net, these are all active IXPs that we have in the Middle East. As you can see, among all these well-known providers like Amazon, Arvon Cloud, Cloudflare, Edgecast, Cachefly, Fastly, Encapsula, only Cloudflare with two peering in the one in UAE, one in Turkey, and Arvon Cloud in 4 IXPs in Iran, none of them has any peering, according to the PCH.net, in these IXPs. So when you compare this to the IXPs that they are in the Europe and the other continents, we see a very low number. In these next 3 slides, I'm going to show you a stats and measurement from RIPE Atlas probes and Wonder Network stats, which shows the latency from Iran, Turkey, and Iraq, 2 other countries. In this slide, this is specific for Iran, and it shows that for example, Iran's latency to UAE is around 190, and in Saudi Arabia around 150, and to other countries as shown in the slide. And if you look at the other countries like Turkey, a little bit better, but still you see a high range of numbers. And the same thing with the UAE. And that's because the lack of the appropriate peering, proper peering between the service providers, telecoms, and the physical connectivity that they have with each other, and instead of the traffic goes directly from one country to another, it will go, it will be routed around the world, like Europe or different continents, and then get back to the destination as we discussed earlier in the panel, and the problem still exists. Here in this chart, I showed you the latency, the Middle East average latency, which shows that whenever the Middle East traffic goes to Europe or other continents, how much latency it will have. And so basically, Middle East traffic will go through Europe, through DECIX or AMDEX, I guess. And we will have the around 110, 130, 13 milliseconds added to our network latency. But if you look at the other continents, if a traffic from Middle East goes to other continents, for example, EU, it will be 113, North America 230, South America 284, and Asia Pacific 305, and Oceanic, for God's sake, 354 milliseconds. So what I want to say is the CDN providers and other networks must be aware of this latencies, and they need to figure out where to do their peering and keep their traffic as local as much as possible by peering in the international and local IXPs to keep the traffic local and serve the content as close as much to the users. Here, I wanted to show you this. If the traffic of the Middle East would be served with among the countries that exist in the Middle East, the latency that we would have would be around 83 or 80. And thanks for your attention, and I will be glad if I will be available to answer your questions if anyone you has.
All right, thank you very much. If you have any questions, please line up at the microphone. We've got one question. As usual, please identify yourself for the microphone's right there. And please tell the internet who you are and who you are speaking for.
My name is Behzad Khoshbakhti, the Senior Network Engineer of Tehran IDC. First of all, I would love to thank you for your great presentation. I know Amar Reza with your great taste of presentation.
Thank you.
The first thing that I want to ask you is that I'm going to specifically talk about the Arvan Cloud load distribution. Would you please elaborate on the load distribution of the Arvan Cloud, firstly?
Well, we are distributed over in Europe, North America, South America. We are peered from, if I get your question correctly, we are peered we investigated all the main IXPs that are common between these providers, other providers like Cloudflare, and everyone that has a big share in the world. And we tried to sit and, except Iran, we tried to sit because we mainly focus in Iran, and our main market is in Iran. And I'm talking about the foreign traffic. Yes. So we went to those points that other providers are already in, and they're exchanging more traffic, like the DECIX that I've told you, and we sat behind, because we aren't directly peered with the providers. We are behind some of the network that they are directly peered in the DECIX and other exchange points. So
let me rephrase the question in other words.
Yep.
It means that, as you might know, that one of the popular the CDNs are from United States, like Cloudflare, MaxCD, and Akamai, BitGravity. As you might know, that their internet technologies are proprietary and they're not open to the public.
Yeah.
And one of the hurdles and big challenges that they're not opening up is that the technology and methodology of the load distribution. For example, let me rephrase it. As I guess that in Arvan Cloud, the sole technology in the load distribution is based on the network-based Anycast IP address. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's going to pose, but in Cloudflare or MaxCDNs, it's one of the options.
Yeah.
They can give you a static IP address, the unicast, rather than the anycast, but still have the existence, the essence of having CDN. Have you ever heard of that? I'm going to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
If you have difficulty?
You know, what we do is that we don't dedicate a specific IP address or anything to a specific website unless if they want. You know, we are public CDN that everyone.
Like shared hosting, right?
Shared hosting.
It's like a shared hosting that you're going to sharing your IP addresses among multiple sites.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like it will be like we have. It's not like one IP, but there is a range. There like a 1/22, and but it's not like in general we dedicate a IP address to a specific website. But I mean, unless they want that. So, but you know, basically what we does is that we do their function. I mean, the whole Anycast network. We have
mitigation.
Yeah, and I don't know what exactly to answer your question because.
Let me rephrase it.
Yep.
Is that I'm going to talk about the problems of having CDN. As you might know, that one of the providers like Flagtail in Iran, they know it as Falcon. They're really prohibitive about the route object and specifically about the advertising AS of that route object. Let me elaborate on that. For example, you do have a range, it is /24, and they mandate the Flagtail, one of the transit provider. They mandate that you need to have the route object in the RIPE NCC database. It's fine. But in one of the providers, they say that we're going to look up the RIPE NCC update, and we're specifically looking for the export entry from the RIPE. If there is a problem in my stating, please correct me. They say that if your adjacent neighbors, BGP neighbors are not in the RIPE database, we're going to discard that BGP network leverageability information. In the case of BGP Anycast, it's going to pose some sort of difficulties if it is not announced as an Anycast. It's one of the hurdles of the Anycast. If I'm wrong, please correct me. And another hurdle of the CDN technologies is, as you said earlier, is that the website owner has to have must delegate the name